You want to be more intelligent, but you're not sure how to do it. You want better grades, or perhaps just want to sound clever when hanging out with your friends. But you find, like a lot of other people, that sometimes things go in one ear and come right out the other. You learn stuff and then you forget it. And when asked about various subjects, you can't always seem to articulate your thoughts when asked to do so. You're not alone, and today we're going to offer you some help. The man who will help us to become more intelligent is now deceased, but in his lifetime, this American physicist named Richard Feynman was quite well known for being able to explain very difficult matters of science to laymen like us. He kind of popularized science in his day, much like the British physicist Brian Cox is busy doing today. We should all try to understand the world around us, but at times, we pick up a book and are just completely overwhelmed by what we read. We won't do a full biography on this dearly departed scientist, but we'll tell you that in 1965 he won the Nobel Prize. He was one of the guys that worked on the atomic bomb. He spearheaded the science of nanotechnology and was a pioneer of quantum computing. He has been called a certified genius and one of the greatest physicists that ever lived. He wanted regular people to know a lot more about science, and he came up with ideas as to how they might learn more and be able to articulate what they know to others. His method for learning stuff became known as the Feynman Technique. And while he was a scientist, his technique could work for any subject matter. Let's say you wanted to wax about Greek philosophy in the bar over a beer, or you'd like to impress someone with your knowledge of the French Revolution, or perhaps just passed a test in school. This technique can help with all of that. First of all, let's look at something an American philosopher named Mortimer Adler once said. His wise words were, "The person who says he knows what he thinks but cannot express it usually does not know what he thinks." So you think you know quite a lot about something, say blockchain technology or how a television works? Then we say to you, "Okay, big brain, explain what you know." You try and do this but can't seem to get it across, and so just say something like, "Well, I know, but I just can't explain it." We've all been in this situation. According to Feynman, this means you actually don't fully understand what you profess to understand. If you really understood it, you could explain it in the simplest terms to someone else and pass on the knowledge. You see, Feynman believed that sometimes we can explain things with a bunch of words, but we really don't know what we're talking about. He said there's a big difference between knowing the name of something and really actually knowing something inside and out. We might now look at something the great Oscar Wilde said, a man who is quoted perhaps more than anyone. He said, "I am so clever that sometimes I don't understand a single word of what I'm saying." We can sometimes think we know something and are able to regurgitate a book we read, but we might not know what we're talking about intimately. For Feynman, we had to get past fuzzy knowledge and know something thoroughly. Albert Einstein would have agreed because he once said this, "If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough." Okay, so how does this actually work? First of all, you have to have a topic, something you want to know more about. Let's take a subject that we've talked about on quite a few of our shows, and that's how babies are made. What happens before we're born? What happens to our body during the act that's making babies? And what happens during pregnancy? If you've seen those shows, you'll know it's all quite complex, but you certainly don't have to be especially clever to be able to explain this to someone else. Nonetheless, sometimes when you research a topic, the words seem difficult. If you want to really understand something, you must be able to read those words and then simplify. Feynman once famously said, "You may know the name of a bird in all the languages of the world, but in the end, you'll know absolutely nothing about whatever the bird is. So let's look at the bird and see what it does. That's what counts." I learned early enough the difference between knowing the name of something and knowing something. According to Feynman, we must start with a topic, then write down everything we already know about this topic on a piece of paper. You could of course use a computer, but let's first do this on paper and then write it up after on a device. This will also help. The second step is to take out all the jargon you just wrote down. Now just tell yourself that you're going to explain all this to a 12-year-old, not to your friend who's in his 20s. This means adding a lot of explanations. In your case, you're describing what happens in a woman's body. So you must explain all the body parts. You can't just say uterus without explaining what it is and what its function is. This is a kid you're talking to, and you must take it that he doesn't know much. According to Feynman, we often just use words we don't fully understand, and by pretending we're explaining something to a child, it'll really let us understand if we actually know what we're talking about. You'll find that when you do it this way, there'll be gaps in what you know. You'll know some stuff well, but there will be parts of a subject you didn't know that well, whether it's a woman's reproductive organs or blockchain technology. So step 2 is to look at where those gaps are, where you could properly relay the correct information to your 12-year-old student. This is where you have to go back to the source material and learn again what you might have read before. Do some reading and then go back to your gap and fill it in using that simple language your student can understand. This will maintain a thorough understanding of the topic and prevent what some people call the illusion of knowledge. Now, when you've filled all those gaps in, make sure of one thing, in that all the language is yours. You haven't just borrowed it from a book, because 12-year-old children wouldn't read the books you were reading. Read aloud what you've written down, and if you think the student wouldn't get it, then simplify it again. Do this until you are 100% sure your student will get what you're saying. You now have taken something fairly difficult and made it very learnable. Well done! You're becoming an excellent teacher. Now comes the best part. You actually have to teach that young student what you've learned. You don't have to always do this, of course, but if you really want to know you've understood your subject matter, then go out and teach someone. It's one thing having something in your head and written it down, but it's another being able to convey that information so someone understands. If you're studying for an exam, say on American independence, then find someone younger than you and explain to them what happened. If they get it, you've succeeded. A 12-year-old kid might not always remember how a television works after you've explained to him, but if that kid understands what you're saying because you've laid it out so simply, you've done well. There's a big difference from explaining things using jargon to explaining things in the most basic language. Feynman believed that if we can't break something down, we haven't actually properly learned it. You might think that some matters of science can't be broken down like this, but just look how that man we mentioned, Brian Cox, does it. He is brilliant at taking very difficult subjects and making them interesting to us laymen. He has said numerous times that Feynman is one of his heroes. Like Feynman, Cox doesn't want to sound clever. This is sometimes a problem in academia, and it can alienate people from wanting to learn something. The truth is that clever people can make difficult things sound easy. Feynman was once asked to write a lecture on why 1/2 spin particles obey Fermi-Dirac. You're thinking, there's no way that he can make that sound easy. When he went back to the guy who had asked him to write that lecture, Feynman said, "I can't do it." He then also said, "I mustn't understand it if I can't do it." So if you can't explain your subject to a 12-year-old, maybe you just have to do more. In matters of science, though, it might actually mean scientists don't yet fully understand something. Maybe you are still in school or university, and maybe you just want to know something better. Now is the time to take out a piece of paper and write down what it is you want to know. You can now start the process we've talked about today. We can assure you that this works, and by using the Feynman technique, you can pretty much learn anything you want. Of course, some books might already be difficult for you, but then you have to find a teacher that's already used the technique and broken the subject matter down. You see this a lot with philosophy. You have people like Kant, Hegel, and Nietzsche that are very difficult to understand, but then you also have people that have written companions to their works to help you understand. We actually found people online who used this technique to get through medical school, and we found lots and lots of people who have used this technique to get through high school. We found teachers and lecturers on forums saying how incredibly effective the method was, and you can find people saying things such as this. All too often, we hear a lecture and can quote back parts of it verbatim. That does not mean we understand the concepts, just that we have remembered the words. The better test is to try to explain the concepts in your own words to someone who isn't in your field, or as some have indicated, the proverbial 5-year-old. To do this, we have to simplify the language and very often use some sort of meaningful metaphor. If we struggle in doing this, then there's likely a hole in our thinking that needs to be repaired before moving on. Have you ever used the Feynman technique? Will you start using it after watching the show? Tell us in the comments. Also, be sure to check out our other video, The Scientifically Proven Best Ways to Study. Thanks for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. See you next time.